Hi, welcome to the show. I have a guest today, as you can see, and it is my friend BethAnne Kapansky-Wright. She is the author of Small Pearls, Big Wisdom, and we're going to be talking about that book, and you're going to love what you hear. Just ask you that you please subscribe and like this episode. Not only does it help others find me, but I really appreciate it. A special hello to Warsaw, Poland. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the show. I see you and I'm delighted to have you here. So, I want to first show you Beth Ann's book. This is her newest book. Isn't it beautiful? And let me show you. It's not a lightweight book. And this is good because it is full of so much wisdom. Welcome back, Beth Ann. So glad to have you here again.
Hi, Ivory. Thank you so much for having me, and hello to all the listeners. It is wonderful to be here.
I'll talk about how I use the book, but tell me how you describe this book.
Absolutely. So the book itself is 365 passages, and they're reflections on the heart of being human. And so even though it's a thick book, each individual reflection is maybe a page, somewhere between half a page to like a page and a quarter. So it's very easy to read and it's very digestible. And every reflection in there has something to do with an aspect of being on this human journey as a spiritual being, and how can we live and feel more inspired and be more authentic and be ourselves and work through life's challenges, work through grief. It covers a lot of emotional and psychological terrain. But as I said, it's broken up into these really small pieces. So it's something that when I designed it, my intention was if somebody wanted to do a passage a day for a year straight, they could. And I also had the idea that if somebody wanted to open to something and just thumb through it until they found something that felt right for their heart, they could do it that way as well. So it's very user friendly and very much a choose your own adventure.
I love that. And I will say, one of the things that I love about this book is you can tell that you have this history, this background doing mental health work. You're a psychologist, and you're also, as I know, a very spiritual person. And you and I share the mental health, the spirituality, but it's reflected in what you write. And so here's an example. Number 73, who we wish to be in this world. I mean that there's some deep topics in here, and every
Yeah.
time I read one, it's exactly what I needed to hear.
Ah, I love that. You know, when I wrote it, it was sort of designed to be like medicine for the soul, medicine for the heart, and something that just gives us a touchstone of wisdom to help us feel more, a little bit more equipped for wherever we find ourselves in life at that point in time.
Well, coming back to your interesting combination of psychology and spirituality, how does that inform your perspective, your work?
What I love about weaving together the worlds of both psychology and spirituality is I feel like it's so encompassing of all that it means to be human and all that it means to be on this human journey and going through the trenches sometimes. We are in the throes of everything happening on the planet at this time, and we're feeling the feelings and working through our own challenges in life and working through finding ways to live with more peace and ease. And I think many humans, regardless of whether or not they would consider themselves particularly spiritual, are drawn to wanting to feel more happy, wanting to feel more peaceful, wanting to feel more easeful. And so there's this depth psychology to all of that of how do we work with those ingredients of just who we are and our behaviors and emotions and our backgrounds. But as I think those who are tuned into the spiritual as well, we have this whole realm that opens up of higher perspective and higher consciousness and being able to really point our arrow in the direction that we want to go, who we wish to be in this world. And for many of us on the spiritual path, who we wish to be is somebody who becomes more loving, more joyful, more compassionate, more able to hold space. And so I think being able to tune into those higher frequencies and have a sense of angels and the Akashic records and our spiritual connection and our energetic connection just weaves in this whole other realm and helps open up so much more space to work with what's really gritty and messy about being human, but also tap into those transcendent, transpersonal energies as well.
And I think that's so important, I'm glad you said how easy this book is to read because sometimes people can be a little intimidated by a thicker book. I'm not, if a book's good, I never want it to end. So I was delighted when I got your book and I'm like, oh yes, it's going to be a while. So what I do, and I know I told this to you, I'm going to tell people listening and watching, is every night I ask my angels, just help me open Beth Ann's book to the passage I most need today. And I open it up, and that's when every single time is like the whole message is like talking to my heart, and it's addressing what's going on in my heart, my mind, my life. So
Yeah.
I call that a daily devotional kind of book that might, we talked about this. I'm not sure that's really the true term for it, but it's really amazing to use in that way. So there's probably some passages I'll never see, or I'll have to read the whole book cover to cover to get, you know how that is? Like you could be
Yeah.
directed to the same passage again and again if you really need it. So it's kind of fun to have it in that way. And it is just, I'll show you, like, I think that's pretty typical. One page is
Yeah,
the
they're
whole
all really
passage.
short. It's a little
Yeah.
bit like be your own oracle or find what you need, sort of
Yes.
this oracle book and
Yes, an
being
oracle
able
book.
to, yeah, use your intuition, ask your angels and, use that to be guided to the passage that's right for your heart at that point in time. And I love that about the book that I really love oracle cards and working with decks and everything. So I love the idea of using a book for that and selecting passages that we feel guided to select the wisdom that we need for questions in our life or challenges or anything that we need inspiration on.
It's an excellent point because just like you would ask Oracle, pull the cards I most need today. You get a little bit more in depth this way. It's fun. So maybe you're like me and you've like seen every one of your cards in your Oracle decks, and it'd be kind of nice to just hear something fresh. And the other thing I want to say about your work, Beth Ann, is you so write from the heart. Like I feel your personality and everything I've read in there, and you don't hold anything back. I can tell.
Thank
You let it
you.
come out, whatever it is. You don't judge yourself, you don't edit it. I'm sure you have an editor, but you don't edit your thoughts. And it's
No.
very lovely that they come out so genuine in that way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. I think well, what's so interesting about this book is it is very heart-based and it was written from the heart. And many of the passages in it, I wrote them to help myself. I've often used my writing as something that helps me work through my own emotional process and understand what's going on with me. And I try and bring a compassionate lens to that to see it through the eyes of wisdom and just see it through the eyes of love. But so much of what's in that book, I wrote it for myself at some point, or I took my own raw process work and eventually shaped it into something that could be shared with others. I think it's that quintessential, the sands rubbing together become the pearl, right? And it's that irritant of the rub that eventually forms these pearls and these pearls of wisdom. But oftentimes, the things in there, I wrote them to paint myself out of a dark corner or write a different story. If I don't like what is happening in my own life and I'm struggling, then who do I want to become? How do I want to work with that? How do I want this story to end? And I think the whole idea behind the book, and this speaks to me so much of our journeys here, is that we don't always have a say in some of the circumstances that happen. Some things just happen in life life and they're part of the journey, but we have a say about how we want to work with them and whom we might want to become from them. And so for me, these passages and writing them, it was this raw material of the heart. And then also really working with the ingredients of my heart to think, well, what do you want to do with this? How do you take this and form something more beautiful than what this junk pile of stuff that you're dealing with feels like. So just seeing them put together and these beautiful passages is such a wonderful thing. But I'm glad that the heart translates in them.
It definitely does. So I know quite a lot about you and your spiritual journey, but would you feel comfortable talking about like what's happening recently in your spiritual journey and particularly what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our spiritual journey is ever ongoing, right? And I have these points in time that I can look back and say, well, here was this awakening time for me and this time of radical change. And here was this transition time. And I think at this particular point in my life, I'm really working with the idea of what happens when we're on the journey. We are doing everything right. I did air quotes if you can't see me for that, because what is right? But we're doing everything that we know to do. We're following our guidance, and hard things are happening. Life is happening as we age and we go through our own developmental process. We have just things that come up. We lose people we love. We have health crises. Life is happening to all of us. We go through these challenges that we're seeing in the greater world at this time. And how do we navigate those? And how do we use our spiritual tools and really dig into them when we're being tested like that? And so right now, at this particular point in my journey, I feel like that's kind of been the last few years, just having various challenges come my way. A big part of my journey and path is the loss of my brother back in 2016 and how that was this catalyst that moved me over to the island of Kauai to be inspired to write books and do more spiritual work and live more intuitively. And those things have really been tested out since I made that move. So it's really a time where I feel like I'm working on growing deeper roots and putting it all to the test. And what inspired me to write the book is I was going back through Word documents in my computer and I stumbled across one with all these half-written pieces that I had cut and pasted from Facebook or something like that years ago when I used to write these things and post it on there. And one of them really helped me with something that I was struggling with about a year ago, I think is when I stumbled across that.
Mhm.
And it was something on relationships and understanding relationships or something like that. And it was so helpful and it felt so relevant. And it really reminded me, no matter how much we grow, no matter how much we feel like we are channeling or raising our vibration or doing that work, we are still subject to being on this journey and dealing with life and relationships and other humans. And we still have these human challenges. And it really helped me see the value in some of that raw process work and just speaking to the heart of being human and putting the passages together. That was kind of the catalyst that inspired me to take this Word document and start developing it and really shaping these passages in a way that I could put into a book. A lot of them were already written or have been heavily edited, but the raw material for many of them was already there.
I want to tell you what an inspiration this woman is because not only is she a very intelligent person and a fabulous author, but she has a very busy private practice for psychology. And
This is true.
people give me a hard time. They're like, how do you get everything done you do? And I'm thinking of you. I'm like, if you knew Beth Ann, I can only aspire to find the time to write the way you do, as busy as you are. So, and I hope that inspires some of you listening and watching that if you think your life is so busy, you can still do these things. You can still find
It's
time for your
true.
creative endeavors, your dreams. the things you want to share with other people. But I think it's so beautiful to put this out at this time. Is very timely with people being under a lot of stress and anxiety and fear right now. There's a lot of comfort in this book.
It feels like somebody's sitting there holding your hand.
Hmm.
And some of that is a reflection of it's things I teach, but what I teach is a reflection of my own inner work and learning to be a good friend to ourselves, learning to be a compassionate presence and compassionately witness our own journey. And I think sometimes when we're in the throes of something challenging and we can just hold our own hand and say, there, I've got you. I'm here for myself. We're going to make it through this together, and really bringing in that wise voice and that wiser part of ourself. And so that is something that's really important to me. I think like that. I talk like that. I write like that. I teach that. And so I think there's something about the book that feels innately comforting and very compassionate because I think we need that wise, compassionate being. All of us have it. That's part of what we access on the spiritual journey is finding our wise, compassionate being. And so I think that comfort piece there is part of what I want the book to evoke to people, but also teach. Here's how we can be a good friend to ourselves in life's storms when things feel dark and speak to ourselves with more self-compassion and self-love.
And we need that so badly.
We
And
do.
as much as it's nice to have people you can count on and people you can talk to, sometimes they're not available. And so you need to be this for yourself. All of us do. So I love that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your brother. I lost a sister about 2 years ago in January, so I can relate to this. And just talk about how losing your brother has shaped you and how it's navigated how you look at grief.
It's so interesting. We just passed the ninth year anniversary of losing him. And I think every anniversary that goes by, you can't not think about not only the loss, but who have I become in the wake of that.
Hmm.
And I feel that Brent's presence and the loss of him is so fundamentally wrapped around how I understand my journey. I am who I am because of me. Brent didn't shape me, but losing him at that point in my life very much shaped me. And it inspired me to live braver and live bigger. And after I'd gone through this initial, I call it the heart of grief, when like you're just in the cave, you are feeling the roughest feelings. You wish you could get a bailout or a time warp or something that kind of catapults you beyond that and takes you when you're out of the heart of the pain. But you just have to go through it and you just have to experience it. And as I was coming out of that back in 2016, part of what I started to feel was this new inspiration, this new life. And this is something we learn, isn't it? When something dies, something else is reborn. We don't go through the death of somebody, the loss of something without having new life and the promise of rebirth and resurrection come out on the other side. And so for me, it was this call to live more authentically and to live in a way that I was really honoring my existence. I was so struck by the timeline that my brother had, and I thought, okay, this is what he had. This was the good of it and the bad of it and the beauty and the things that were hard. And, all of these things represent Brent and represent who he was to me and what might he have done differently had he known that this is the amount of time that he would get. And would he have lived braver? Would he have made different choices? We don't know the answer to that. But I do think that I took that and eventually used it to ask myself those questions. And it's not that really cliche, live every day like it's your last. That's a lot of pressure to do, I think, to do that like every single day. But it was more like, how do I want to point my life? What direction do I want to move it in order to become who I feel I need to be? And so it was this catalyst to move over here. And I think that going through something like that, it makes you a lot braver. It teaches you how much you can weather life's storms. I learned so much as well about how grief is not a one-time journey and we go through the worst of it and it's over. It's an evolving relationship. And I think that grief is very much love. It's these, two sides of the same coin, and they both inform one another. And so I feel like in grieving Brent, it also taught me to love more deeply and to open my heart more deeply. And every year when the anniversary comes around, I think that question of who have I become and how has my grief evolved helps me understand grief as a lifelong journey, not in a sad way, but in a way that feels like this is a privilege to feel these feelings because it means I remember Brent and I honor him. And when I remember, it encourages me and inspires me to live better and live braver.
And that's big. And I know you write in here because I've already found one passage on my nightly book oracle journey that was talking about that. It's so relatable because most people have lost people they love, and most people don't know how to deal with grief. So I think there's some really valuable insights into that in there as well. I know that's not the thrust of the book. It's kind of covers a little bit of everything,
It
but there's
does.
things in there.
It's a nice section in there. There's the 12 there's 12 different sections in the book, and so one of them is grief because it's so universal. And even if we haven't had loss of somebody that we've loved, we've had loss. We've lost something. We've lost an identity. We've lost a relationship. We've gone through some other version of what grief is. It's not just the death of a loved one that's grief. There's many, many
So
things that we
true.
go through that give us grief. So I think that understanding it and being okay talking about it, and finding ways to talk about it on the spiritual journey is really important to our growth.
Absolutely. I'm thinking right now about there's so many people who are losing their jobs, which is
Yeah.
grief, or losing mobility, which is another form of grief,
Very
all
much
these
so.
different
Yeah.
ways.
The loss of how we thought things might be and the acceptance of how things are. There's
Yes.
grief right there. I feel like there's actually been like a collective consciousness and shift around grief that's happening for many of us for multiple years now. I just don't know that everybody knows to call it that or recognize it for what it is, but I very much see it and see it as this heart chakra opening and massive heart clearing going on right now, around grief.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. So I've talked about this a lot, but I'd love to hear your perspective on how you can work with difficulties, just something constructive, help you raise your vibration. What are your favorite ways to do that?
I think that we have to feel it in order to heal it. And that's hard for a lot of us because if we are working on raising our vibration and we are working on living a more in a more enlightened way and being more lighter and brighter in who we are, it can be really hard sometimes to feel those difficulties and challenges. The feelings that come up from those, that raw material, can be so hard for us. But I found that if we can see it for what it is and just name it for what it is, this is raw emotional processing right now. This is not my heart. It's not maybe who I want to be, but I need to feel these things and find a way to work through them. So I love taking some time in my journal to actually give myself permission to write down like all the bad things I'm feeling about something. Everything wrong that we're sometimes might say, don't focus on this. It's going to bring more negativity into your life. Don't feel this way. Like I like to throw out the don'ts and just give myself permission to be like, this is just your raw process work. It's not your truth. They're just feelings. It's just information and it's flowing through and it's passing through. And I think that perspective is helpful too, because if we can see that those sticky, hard feelings and attachments and the wounds there are not our truth, it's just old information and it's the raw material that we're being asked to work with. That's the sand, right? The irritants that we keep rubbing together in order to find our wisdom. So I like having a way to acknowledge those and to make space for those. And then I really appreciate looking at what are the hidden lights and what I'm going through right now. And that can be challenging to find. If we're really in the throes of a challenge, it's hard to see the hidden lights. Sometimes those are things that we might not always find until we're on the other side of something. But I've always loved that concept of looking for buried treasure or diving for the light or, searching for something, foraging for like hidden things that have been buried, hidden gems in the ground, and unearthing those during difficulties and challenges. It's a really difficult paradox that that's the stuff that usually grows us the most and it opens our heart the most.
Yes, it
And it
does.
makes us the wise, like wiser than we were before. If we don't have those things, it's hard to experience a lot of growth because it usually means things are going okay. And I love it when things are okay. That's a really nice feeling to be in flow, but there's not as much growth there. There's nothing pushing us to dig deeper or expand our mind or grapple with something in a way that we're forced to creatively redirect our focus and find a new way to look at issue in our life. And that's ultimately where I like to get to with anything is being able to see it's all an invitation to use it as raw material to work with it and to see what can I create from this when I find those hidden lights, how might they help me grow as a person. And what I love about this so much, we talk so much about raising our frequency and these things we can do to raise our vibration and open our hearts and all of that. But if we are just living our human journey and we are doing our work as it shows up and we are working through the things that feel sticky and hard in our life and we're pointing our thoughts and our heart and our energy and the direction of using it for growth, we innately we find the light and we open our hearts a little bit more. And when we open our hearts and we've like cleared off another layer of film, of something that was keeping us from experiencing more love, more self-compassion, the minute we do that, we've just raised our frequency. So it has nothing to do, I think, when those hard things come with trying to push them aside and focus on something that raises our vibration. It is working with them and allowing them to transform us and transform our hearts. And when our hearts transform, they become more open. It's just an innate process. It's what our hearts are created to do, I think, on the spiritual journey, and that automatically raises our vibration.
Because our souls crave growth.
They do. It's
That's the
why they're
essence
here.
of their meaning, of their being is to grow.
Yes, it's why they're here. I try and remember that sometimes if I'm going through something, I'm like, your soul's probably delighting in this right
Yes, they're
now.
like, yes, go, Beth Ann.
Yes.
You're curled in a fetal position,
Yeah.
trying to get through it. But that's true for
Ah,
all of us. And, I have this conversation a lot with clients and friends that just realize when you're going through the worst times, you're growing the most. And I know
so
it's been true
true.
for me. We've talked about it. It's been true for you. Many other spiritual workers that I know, we've realized that it doesn't make it so easy to go through the rough times, but that perspective does help.
It gives it meaning, I think. And if we can give something meaning and have a sense of purpose around it, I think it helps us feel like we are not off course. We're still exactly where we need to be. And, that gives us enough, little bit more oomph to keep going through it.
Absolutely. And we all need some extra oomph right now. So
We really do. We we need some fairy dust and good juju.
I have some fairy dust. I'll sprinkle some for you, Beth Ann.
Yes, please.
And one interesting thing too, we were talking a little, mentioned about the heart, and I want to say Beth Ann does a lot of work under your heart magic, and that's kind of your
Do.
thing. So why did you choose the heart to be what you work through?
For me, the most meaningful things that have happened in my life have been because I have been following what I call the way of the heart, listening to my heart and following its wisdom. And ultimately, when I went through what I think of as my biggest spiritual awakening years ago, I really listened to my heart on something in my life, and it really forced a complete life change from who I'd been and opened me up to this whole new terrain of experiencing this, brand new BethAnne. And what I realized as I'd gone through that is that something in here had become so much brighter and bigger. Like I could feel it. I could feel my heart. I will often have a sense that it's glowing or vibrating or things that sometimes we might think of as feeling the angels, but I'll feel it in the space inside of me, and it's in this heart chakra region. And I really had this awareness of my heart as something that was intelligent and it was wise and it was wild. It had this intuitive intelligence that was giving me directions if I listened to it, just through the act of getting quiet and journaling and trying to get in touch with my inner voice and the voice of the heart, and that it knew exactly what it was doing. So I think that for me is such a inspiration. And so many of us get so stuck in our minds and stuck in racing thoughts and overthinking things. And helping people figure out, like, how do we drop from the mind into the heart and listen to that voice? Because it always steers us right. That's the voice of our higher self. It's what connects us to spirit. It's what connects us to love. And when we can follow that, we're on the path. So I love talking about the heart. And like I said, it's wild and wise. So it continues to reveal new mysteries to me, which is really fun to tap into since I'm always seeking to grow in my understanding of my work as well.
I love that description of the heart being wild. That's so perfect.
Yeah,
When you get
untamed.
when you get guidance you don't want, when you want to do something and you're being guided to do something you know is better, I know that's coming from the heart.
I know.
That is your soul telling you, mm-mm-mm, you know that's not the right thing to do.
It's so true.
Doesn't mean you're gonna love it.
It's so true. Or something radical, right? Something that
Yes.
asks you to be the bigger person or do the higher thing, but it's coming from in here. And you're like, but my ego doesn't want to. I want to be small and petty. And this part of you is like, right, but this is what you're going to do anyways, because you're following the guidance in here.
100%. My heart, it does that. I'm sure everybody's does. Beth Ann, thank you so much for being on the show again. And I just want to show your book again so people will recognize it. And I will put the title of this book in the show notes so that you can find it on Amazon. That's where I got my copy. And it's such a great book for yourself,
Yeah.
a gift for a friend, a loved one. I think it's one I'm going to be reading for years. So I so
Thank
appreciate it. It's
you.
always lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a delight to come on the show, and it's always a delight to connect and spend time with you.
Same here. Thank you
Yay!
so much. And I just want to say, tune in next week. The topic is Planes of Existence. That comes out next Sunday. In the meantime, may your angels surround you. May your angels protect you every moment, every day of your life. I'll see you next week.